My name is Jake Morrison. I'm what you'd call a corrections officer, though that sounds more professional than what I really am, a guard who watches cages. I work the night shift at Ravens Hollow Correctional Facility, and for the past 8 months, I've been assigned to Cell Block D. If you know anything about Ravens Hollow, you've probably heard the stories. If you haven't, consider yourself lucky. Before this, I was nobody worth mentioning. Just another ex-con trying to convince the world I'd changed. Yeah, you heard that right. I used to be on the other side of these bars. 3 years in state prison for aggravated assault. Bar fight that went too far. Guy's skull met the corner of a pool table, and suddenly I was looking at 5 to 10. Got out in 3 for good behavior, which mostly meant keeping my head down and reading every book in the prison library twice. You'd think being an ex-convict would disqualify me from guard work. You'd be right, usually. But Ravens Hollow isn't usual, and Cell Block D is about as far from usual as you can get while still technically being on Earth. I found the job listing on a board at my parole officer's building. Small card, easy to miss, tucked between ads for day labor and CDL training. Corrections positions available. Past criminal record not a disqualifier for select positions. Competitive pay. Night shift only. The address was for a recruiting office in a strip mall that had seen better decades. The interviewer, a thin man with eyes that never quite focused on the same spot, asked me exactly 3 questions. Could I follow rules without questioning them? Could I keep my mouth shut about what I saw? Was I afraid of the dark? I answered yes, and no, though that last one was a lie. 2 weeks later, I was on a bus heading north into the mountains, watching civilization fade into pine forests and eventually into nothing at all. Ravens Hollow sits in a valley that doesn't appear on most maps, surrounded by mountains that seem taller than they should be, like they're trying to hide something from the sky. The prison itself is old, built in 1892 as a state asylum, converted to a federal prison in 1934, then somehow forgotten by every government agency except the ones that matter. It's a sprawling complex of brick and concrete, all sharp angles and narrow windows. Most of it looks abandoned, but looks are deceiving here. Every building serves a purpose, even the ones that appear empty. Cell Block D sits apart from the main complex, connected by a single covered walkway they call the Throat. It's a squat, brutal building that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. No windows on the ground floor, narrow slits on the second and the third floor. Well, we don't talk about the third floor. My first night, I stood outside the employee entrance, duffel bag in hand, wondering what kind of desperate I had to be to take this job. The answer was simple, the kind of desperate that comes with having a record, a dying mother with medical bills, and skills that don't translate to anything legal. The door opened before I could knock. That should have been my first warning. The prison. Let me paint you a picture of Ravens Hollow, because understanding the layout might save your life if you ever end up here, though God help you if you do. The main complex houses about 1,200 inmates in 4 standard cell blocks, A through C, and then there's D. Blocks A through C are what you'd expect. Double-bunked cells, common areas, exercise yards, the usual maximum security setup. The inmates there are murderers, rapists, the worst humanity has to offer. But they're still human. Cell Block D is different. From the outside, it looks like any other prison building. 3 stories of reinforced concrete and steel, painted institutional beige that's faded to the color of old bones. But the architecture is wrong if you look close enough. The windows don't align properly. Count them from outside, you get 12 per floor. Count from inside, you get 14. The building is somehow bigger on the inside, though the blueprints insist that's impossible. The ground floor has 20 cells, numbered D, 101 through D, 120. The second floor should have 20 more, D, 201 through D, 220. I say should because the numbers skip. There's no D, 213. There's a door where D, 213 should be, but it's not a cell. It's welded shut, has been since 1971, and if you put your ear against it, you can hear something breathing on the other side. The third floor. Officially, the third floor is storage. Unofficially, we're told never to go up there alone, never go up there after midnight, and never, ever go up there during a new moon. The one time I glimpsed it through a barely cracked door, I saw cells that weren't on any blueprint, cells with doors that opened the wrong way, and something that might have been an inmate but had too many joints in its arms. My daily routine, if you can call anything about this place routine, starts at 10 p.m. Clock in at the security office, a cramped room that smells like mildew and fierce sweat. Pick up my equipment, radio, flashlight, baton, pepper spray, and a small leather pouch that contains salt, iron filings, and a piece of wood from a church that burned down in 1909. Don't ask me what that last item is for. You don't want to know. The shift runs until 6 a.m. 8 hours of walking the floors, checking cells, counting inmates, though the count is never quite right. There's always one more or one less than there should be, but we log the official number anyway. 20 on the first floor, 19 on the second. Remember, no D, 213, and we don't count the third floor. We just listen for screams. The cells themselves are standard 8 by 10 concrete boxes, each with a steel toilet, sink, and a bed that's bolted to the floor. Some cells have scratch marks on the walls that look like language if you stare too long. Others have stains that won't come out no matter how much industrial bleach we use. Cell D, 117 has a window that shows a view of mountains that don't match the mountains outside. The smell is the worst part. It's not just the usual prison cocktail of sweat, piss, and desperation. Cell block D smells like copper pennies and burnt matches, with an undertone of something sweet and rotten, like fruit that's gone bad in a place fruit should never be. At night, the lights dim but never fully shut off. Management says it's for security, but the real reason is that things happen in complete darkness here. Things that leave inmates catatonic or missing fingers they swear they still had at lights out. The sound is constant. During the day, it's almost normal, talking, yelling, toilets flushing, metal on metal. But at night, there are other sounds. Whispers in languages that don't exist. Scratching from inside the walls. And sometimes, if you're very unlucky, singing a low, wordless melody that makes your teeth ache and your eyes water. Meeting Tommy. I met Tommy Castellano my first night on the job. He was waiting in the security office, feet up on the desk, reading a paperback that looked like it had survived a flood. "You're Morrison," he said without looking up. The new guy with the record. Tommy was somewhere in his 60s, built like an old boxer who'd taken too many hits but refused to go down. Gray hair cut close to his skull, revealing scars that crisscrossed his scalp like a roadmap of violence. His left eye was clouded, not blind, he'd tell me later, just seeing different things than the right one. His hands were massive, knuckles scarred and swollen from decades of use. "Tommy Castellano," he said, finally looking at me. His good eye was brown, warm despite everything. His clouded eye seemed to look through me. "I'll be your training officer for the next 2 weeks. After that, you're on your own, if you last that long." "That's supposed to scare me?" Tommy laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "Kid, if you ain't scared, you ain't paying attention. Fear's what keeps you alive in D Block. Fear and following the rules." He stood up, and I noticed he moved carefully, like a man who'd learned that sudden movements attracted unwanted attention. There was a slight tremor in his left hand that he tried to hide by keeping it in his pocket. "Been working this block since '92, he said, leading me toward the door. 31 years come December. Seen 100 guards come through. Maybe 10 lasted more than a year. Free made it past 5 years. I'm the only one left from my training class. What happened to the others? Some quit. Some transferred. Some." He paused at the door, hand on the handle. "Some are still here, technically. We just don't let them work the floor anymore. Hard to do the job when you can't stop screaming about the things in the walls." As we walked through the corridors towards cell block D, Tommy filled me in on the basics. Don't make eye contact with certain inmates. Don't respond if someone calls your name from a cell you know is empty. Don't touch the black mold growing in the corners. It's not mold, and it doesn't like being disturbed. But most importantly, he said as we reached the entrance to D Block, you follow the rules. 6 rules, carved in stone, written in blood, paid for with the sanity of better men than us. He pulled out a laminated card, worn soft from years of handling. 6 rules, typed in simple font. Never open cell D, 213. Count must be completed before 3 a.m. Do not acknowledge the woman in the hallway. If an inmate asks for water after midnight, check their eyes first. During a lockdown, stay out of the shadows. The 3rd floor is off limits during new moons. Memorize them, Tommy said. Live by them. Because I promise you, the one time you forget, the one time you think just this once, that's when this place shows you what it really is. And what is it really? Tommy looked at me with both eyes, the brown one full of pity, the clouded one seeing something I couldn't. A mistake, he said. A crack in the world that we're trying to hold shut with rules and routine. And some nights, that ain't enough. The history. Over my first week, Tommy fed me pieces of Ravensshallow's history like medicine, small doses to build up immunity to the truth. The prison was built on bad ground. The original asylum was constructed here because the land was cheap, sold by the state after 3 failed attempts at settlement. The first settlers in 1834 disappeared entirely. The second group in 1855 was found dead, their bodies arranged in a pattern that hurt to look at. The third attempt in 1878 ended when the entire settlement burned down in a fire that witnesses swore burned cold. The natives knew. Tommy said one night as we did our rounds. The Abenaki, the Mohawk, all of them. They called this valley the mouth that swallows. They had stories about things that lived in. The mountains, things that were here before people, before animals, maybe before anything was supposed to be here. The asylum years were relatively quiet. If you didn't count the patients who claimed they could see through the walls, or the doctors who quit after reporting that some patients had too many shadows. When it converted to a prison in 1934, things got worse. First warden lasted 6 months. Tommy continued. Found him in his office, doors locked from inside, body turned inside out. Not metaphorically, literally inside out, like someone had grabbed him by the soul and pulled. Second warden built cell block D to house the special cases. Special cases? Inmates who'd been changed by this place. Ones who didn't follow human rules anymore. Block D was supposed to contain them, keep them separate from the general population. Tommy spat. Instead, it became a beacon. Started attracting things. Things that looked like inmates, but weren't. Things that were inmates, but became something else. The incident that led to D-213 being sealed happened in 1971. An inmate named William Cray had been housed there. A serial killer who claimed he could hear the geometries singing. One night, guards heard screaming from his cell. When they opened it, Cray was gone, but the cell wasn't empty. Something else was there, something that hurt to perceive directly. 3 guards died trying to force it back into wherever Cray had gone. They finally sealed the door and pretended the cell never existed. But the worst part, Tommy said, stopping at cell D-117, is that we keep filling up. Inmates come in, but they don't leave. Not through death, not through transfer, not through release. The official records show D block at capacity 39 inmates. But if you count, really count, you'll get a different number every time. Sometimes 38, sometimes 41, sometimes numbers that don't make sense, like purple or the taste of copper. How is that possible? This place doesn't follow the rules, Tommy said simply. Physics, time, space, they're suggestions here. The only rules that matter are the 6 we follow. They're not perfect, but they're boundaries. Lines drawn in sand against an ocean of ROM. He showed me the logbooks, decades of entries, each more disturbing than the last. Guards reporting inmates in 2 places at once. Cells that were empty at one check and full at the next, with inmates who'd been dead for years. Voices from the 3rd floor calling for help in languages that predated human speech. Why doesn't anyone do something? I asked. Shut it down. Transfer everyone out. Tommy laughed bitterly. You think we haven't tried? Every attempt to close D block has failed. Construction crews refuse to come back after their equipment melts. Transfer buses break down before they arrive. And the inmates, some of them can't leave. Not won't, can't. Take them past the fence line and they just stop existing. Then they're back in their cells the next night. No memory of trying to leave. So we're stuck here? We're guards, Tommy corrected. Not of the inmates. They're just the excuse. We're guarding the rest of the world from what this place really is. And as long as someone stands watch, as long as someone follows the rules, the door stays mostly closed. Mostly. Tommy's clouded eye twitched. Some nights, the door opens a crack. That's when we earn our pay. That's when the rules are all that stand between us and something that makes death look like a mercy. He handed me a flashlight, heavy and cold. Ready for your first real shift. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Rule 1. Never open cell D-213. Tommy taught me this rule on my 3rd night, standing well back from the welded door that shouldn't exist. This one's simple, he said, though his voice suggested otherwise. No matter what you hear, no matter who seems to be inside, no matter what paperwork comes down saying it needs inspection, you never open D-213. The door itself was wrong. It was standard prison cell door dimensions, but the metal looked older than the rest of the block, covered in weld marks that formed patterns that almost made sense if you didn't look directly at them. The number 213 had been scratched out and re-etched 17 times, each version slightly different, like someone kept forgetting how numbers worked. "What's in there?" I asked. William Cray, technically, or what's left of him, or what he became, or what was always there and just wore him like a suit for a while. Tommy pulled out a hip flask, took a swig of something that smelled like paint thinner. Depends on which report you read. That night passed without incident. D-213 remained silent. It was my second week when I heard the knocking. I was doing my 1 a.m. rounds, checking locks, counting shadows that shouldn't move but did. The knock came from inside D-213, 3 measured raps, perfectly timed, perfectly normal. "Help me." The voice was male, middle-aged, tired. "Please. I've been in here so long." I stopped, flashlight beam hitting the welded door. Tommy's warning echoed in my head, but the voice sounded so human, so genuinely desperate. "It's so dark," the voice continued. "I can't remember my name. Was it William? I think it was William. Please, just open the door. Just for a moment. I need to see light that isn't the color of screaming." My hand moved toward my keys before I caught myself. The voice was coming from inside the cell, but also from above it, below it, from the walls themselves. "Please," it said, and now it was using my mother's voice. "Jake, honey, let me out. I'm so sick, baby. The cancer, it hurts so much. But I'm here somehow. Let me out so I can say goodbye properly." I backed away, but the voice followed, shifting through people I knew, my ex-girlfriend, my parole officer, the man I'd nearly killed in that bar fight. Then the door started to bulge outward, metal stretching like taffy. Something pressed against it from inside, leaving an impression that looked almost like a face but had too many features in the wrong places. The welding held, but barely. "You're not very polite," the voice said, no longer pretending to be human. It sounded like feedback from a microphone that had learned to hate. "I've been asking nicely for 52 years, 3 months, 9 days, 16 hours, and 43 seconds. But time moves different in here. I've also been asking for no time at all and all time at once." The bulge in the door grew larger. I could see fingers pushing through. Too many fingers that bent in ways that made my eyes water. "One day," it whispered, back to sounding human but wrong, like a recording played at the almost right speed, "someone will open this door. Maybe you. Maybe your replacement. Maybe your replacement's replacement. And when that happens, I'll wear them like William wore his skin, and I'll walk out of here into a world that's forgotten how to scream properly. I'll teach it. I'll teach it so well." The fingers retreated. The door returned to its normal shape, though the metal looked more tired than before, more stressed. Another few years of that, and the welding might not hold. I never went near D-213 during my rounds again. I counted it from a distance, confirmed it was still sealed, and moved on. Sometimes I still hear voices from inside. William Cray, my mother, myself. Sometimes they beg. Sometimes they threaten. Sometimes they just describe what they'll do when they get out, in detail that makes me skip meals. The door holds. For now. Rule 2. Count must be completed before 3 a.m. This one's about timing. Tommy explained on my 5th night. Every shift, you count the inmates. Every cell, every face, every shadow that might be a person. And you log it before 3 a.m. hits. Not 3:01, not 2:59, before 3 o'clock exactly. Why 3 a.m.? Because that's when they get counted by something else. And if our count isn't done, if we're still on the floor when the other count starts. He trailed off, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. Let's just say you don't want your number to be included in that tally. The counting seemed straightforward at first. Start at D-101. Work your way through to D-120, then up to the second floor for D-201 through D-220, skipping D-213, of course. Mark each inmate present. Note any irregularities, log the total. The problem was, the inmates in cell block D weren't always consistent. D-104 housed an inmate named Marcus Webb, convicted of killing 13 people in ritual murders. Sometimes Marcus was a tall black man with prison tattoos. Sometimes he was a short white woman with no eyes. Sometimes he was just a shadow that nodded when you shined your light on it. But the log always read, Marcus Webb, present. D-115 was supposed to be empty according to the official records, but there was always someone in there. Different every night. When I asked Tommy, he just said, we count who's there, not who's supposed to be there. It was 3 weeks into my solo shifts when I ran late on the count. A fight had broken out in D-108, or what passed for a fight when one inmate existed in 3 dimensions and the other existed in 5. By the time I'd called it in and waited for the response team, who showed up in hazmat suits for some reason, it was 2:47 a.m., 13 minutes to count 19 cells on the second floor. I ran. Protocol be damned. I ran from cell to cell, flashlight beams sweeping across faces that weren't always faces, counting bodies that weren't always singular. D-201, present. D-202, present. D-203, present but inverted. D-204, technically present. I was at D-217 when my watch showed 2:58. 3 more cells. 2 minutes. D-218's inmate was spread across all 4 walls like paint. Still counted as present. D-219 had 2 inmates where there should be 1, but they shared a shadow, so I counted them as 1. D-220, 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 30 seconds. The inmate in D-220 wasn't there. The cell was empty. But protocol said count who's there, and no one was there. So I marked it empty and ran for the security station. 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 55 seconds. I slammed through the door and hit the log submission button at 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. The clock turned to 3 hours. The lights in cell block D went out. Not dimmed out. Complete darkness that seemed to eat our flashlight beams. And then the other count began. I could hear it. Them, moving through the block. Footsteps that didn't sound like feet. Voices that counted in languages that predated sound. They moved from cell to cell, and where they passed, the inmates made noises I'd never heard before. Not screams, not cries, but something worse. Acknowledgement. Don't move, Tommy whispered beside me. Don't breathe loud. Don't think loud. They're checking their roster. Through the security office window, I saw lights that weren't lights moving through the block. They were the wrong color, a shade between purple and screaming. They stopped at each cell, and shadows that shouldn't exist cast themselves on walls that faced the wrong direction. At D-220, they stopped longer. The empty cell. The lights turned toward our office. I felt them looking, though they had nothing that could be called eyes. The temperature dropped so fast frost formed on the windows. Then a voice like grinding glass spoke. The count is acceptable. 1 absence noted. Payment deferred. The lights went out, the wrong lights. The normal lights flickered back on. The inmates were silent. What was that? I gasped. The real owners, Tommy said. The ones who were here first. Every night at 3 a.m., they check their property. As long as our count is done, as long as the numbers match closely enough, they accept it. But if we're still counting when they start, what? Then we become part of the count. Permanently. I never ran late on the count again. Rule 3. Do not acknowledge the woman in the hallway. I first saw her during my 4th week. A woman in a corrections officer uniform from the 1960s, walking the 2nd floor of D block. Her hair was styled in a beehive, her uniform pressed and clean, her shoes clicking on the concrete with metronomic precision. Who's that? I asked Tommy, pointing at the monitor showing the 2nd floor feed. Tommy glanced at the screen, then immediately looked away. You don't see anyone. But there's clearly. You don't see anyone. His good eye was locked on mine, deadly serious. Rule 3. Do not acknowledge the woman in the hallway. Don't look at her. Don't talk to her. Don't even think about her too hard. But who? Margaret Cahill. Guard here from 1962 to 1968. Died in 1968. Still shows up for her shift every night. I watched on the monitor as she stopped at each cell, checking locks that had been changed 3 times since her death, making notes on a clipboard that shouldn't exist. How did she die? Acknowledged something she shouldn't have. It acknowledged her back. Now she's stuck in a loop, doing her rounds forever. And if you acknowledge her, if you make her realize what she is. Tommy shuddered. She breaks the loop. And trust me, you don't want to see what she becomes when she remembers she's dead. For weeks, I managed to avoid her. When I saw her on the monitors, I looked away. When I heard her shoes clicking in the hallway, I found somewhere else to be. The one time we passed in a corridor, I stared straight ahead, pretending she wasn't there, even though every instinct screamed at me to look, to be polite, to acknowledge a fellow officer. But 2 months into the job, I screwed up. I was exhausted, hadn't slept in 36 hours, running on coffee and whatever pills Tommy shared from his seemingly endless supply. I was doing my rounds on the second floor when I turned a corner and almost walked into her. She was standing there, checking the lock on D207, humming something from the 60s. Without thinking, running on autopilot and basic human politeness, I said, "Excuse me." She stopped humming. Slowly, like a door on rusty hinges, her head turned toward me. Her face was perfect, too perfect, like a photograph of a face rather than an actual face. Her eyes were the flat black of old film negatives. "You can see me?" Her voice was hopeful and horrible, like a drowning person who'd just learned they'd been underwater for 50 years. I tried to look away, to pretend I hadn't spoken, but it was too late. She stepped toward me, and with each step, she became less solid, less human. Her uniform started to rot, aging 50 years in seconds. Her skin followed suit, peeling away like old paint. "I've been alone for so long," she said, reaching for me with hands that were becoming bones. "No one sees me. No one talks to me. But you do. You can be my friend. We can do rounds together. Forever." Her touch was cold. Not winter cold, but the cold of spaces between stars. Where her skeletal fingers brushed my arm, the skin turned black with frostbite. That's when Tommy appeared, throwing a handful of salt mixed with iron filings. It passed right through Margaret, but the gesture seemed to break her focus. She flickered, becoming translucent. "Margaret Cahill," Tommy shouted. "Badge number 4517. You're off duty. Your shift ended at 0600 hours, November 15th, 1968. She stopped, confused. "But my rounds are complete. All cells checked. All inmates accounted for. You're off duty, Officer Cahill. Time to go home." For a moment, she solidified again, looking human, looking grateful. "Off duty? I can go home. Yeah, Maggie, you can go home." She smiled, a real smile, not the painted-on expression she usually wore. Then she faded away, leaving only the smell of old perfume and decay. "She'll be back tomorrow," Tommy said, helping me to the infirmary. "She always comes back, but she won't remember this. Won't remember you acknowledged her. As long as you don't do it again." My arm took 3 weeks to heal. The frostbite scars are still there, a reminder that politeness can kill you in cell block D. Rule 4. If an inmate asks for water after midnight, check their eyes first. Some of them aren't inmates anymore, Tommy explained during my 6th week. They look like inmates. They're in the cells where inmates should be, but something's replaced them. Warn them. And the ones wearing human suits? They get thirsty, but not for water. The rule seemed simple enough. If an inmate requests water after midnight, shine your light in their eyes. If the eyes reflect the light normally, give them water. If they don't reflect, or if they reflect wrong, walk away and log it in the special incidents book that no one officially reads. "What are they thirsty for?" I asked. "Best not to know," Tommy said. "But I'll tell you anyway, because knowing might save your life. They're thirsty for the wet parts of you. Blood, spinal fluid, the moisture in your eyes. They can smell it through the bars, and it drives them crazy." It was during my 2nd month of solo shifts when I got my first after-midnight water request. "Guard." The voice came from D118. "Guard, please. Water." D118 housed Robert Marsh, a serial strangler who'd been in Block D for 7 years. He was usually quiet, spent most of his time drawing patterns on his cell walls with his fingernails. I approached the cell, flashlight ready. "Eyes first, Marsh." He pressed his face against the bars, and I shined my light directly into his eyes. They didn't reflect. Instead, the light seemed to go into them, absorbed by a darkness that had depth but no end. And in that depth, things moved, shapes that might have been swimming or might have been reaching. "Please," Marsh said, but his voice was different now, hollow and multiplied, like a chorus speaking from inside a cave. "So thirsty. The wet. Need the wet." I stepped back, but it pressed harder against the bars. The metal began to bend outward, which should have been impossible. His face started to push through the gaps, flesh flowing like water, reshaping to fit through spaces too small for a human head. The wet inside you, it whispered, can hear it, pumping, flowing, full of salt and memories. Just a taste, just one drop. His arm came through the bars, stretching impossibly long, fingers reaching for my face. The skin split as it stretched, revealing not muscle and bone underneath, but something dark and viscous, like oil that had learned to hunger. I stumbled backward, fumbling for the salt packets Tommy had made me carry. The thing wearing Marsh's body made a sound like laughter filtered through water. Next time, it said, pulling itself back through the bars, reshaping into something that looked human again. Next time you'll be thirstier. And when you come for water, I'll check your eyes. I logged it in the Special Incidents book. D-118 requested water at 0145 hours. Eyes non-reflective. Request denied. The next morning, Robert Marsh was himself again, confused about the scratches on his arms, no memory of the night. But sometimes, when I pass his cell, I catch him looking at me with an expression that's pure thirst, and his eyes eat light instead of reflecting it. Tommy told me later that 3 guards have given water to inmates with non-reflective eyes. One was found drained, every drop of moisture pulled from his body, leaving a mummy that crumbled to dust when touched. One was found turned inside out, his wet parts on the outside, still somehow alive for 6 hours. The third was never found, but sometimes, late at night, you can hear splashing from the pipes in the walls and a voice begging for just one more drink. Rule 5. During a lockdown, stay out of the shadows. Lockdowns happen maybe once a month in Cell Block D. Sometimes it's because an inmate has done something that bends reality too much. Sometimes it's because something from the 3rd floor has gotten loose. Sometimes it's because the shadows are hungry. When the lockdown alarm sounds, Tommy told me, you find light and you stay in it. Not near it, in it. And you don't step into any shadow, no matter how small, until the all clear sounds. Why? What's in the shadows? The shadows are what's in the shadows. During a lockdown, they stop being the absence of light and start being the presence of something else. My first lockdown happened 2 months into my solo shifts. The alarm sounded at 1:47 a.m., 3 long blasts followed by a recorded voice saying, "Lockdown initiated. Seek illumination. Avoid all shadows." I was on the 2nd floor, halfway between the security lights. The nearest pool of bright light was 20 feet away, but between me and it, the shadows cast by the cell bars created a maze of darkness. I ran for the light, but I wasn't fast enough. The shadows moved. Not the objects casting them, the shadows themselves. They peeled away from the floor like living things, reaching up with tendrils of pure darkness. Where they touched the walls, the concrete aged decades in seconds, crumbling to dust. One wrapped around my ankle. The cold was beyond description, not just absence of heat, but active anti-heat, pulling warmth from my body so fast ice crystals formed on my skin. But worse than the cold was the feeling of being pulled, not physically, but essentially, like the shadow was trying to drag my existence into itself. I managed to break free, leaving part of my boot behind. The part the shadow touched simply wasn't there anymore, not destroyed, just absent, and dove into the circle of light beneath the security lamp. The shadows surrounded me, pressing against the edge of the light like ink against glass. And in them, I saw things. People were what used to be people, suspended in the darkness. Some were guards I recognized from old photos in the break room. Others were inmates who'd been listed as escaped or deceased. They floated in the shadows, eyes open, mouths moving in silent screams, perfectly preserved in moments of terror. One pressed against the light barrier right in front of me. It was a guard from the 1980s, his badge still visible. He mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I could read his lips. "Don't let them take you. The shadow place has no time. I've been screaming for 1 second. I've been screaming for 40 years. The shadows pulsed, and more faces appeared. Dozens, hundreds. All the people who'd been caught over the decades, pulled into the darkness during lockdowns. They were conscious, aware, trapped in a place where light had never existed and never would. The lockdown lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of standing in a circle of light maybe 4 feet across, watching the shadows writhe and reach, seeing faces of the damned pressing against the barrier. My legs cramped. My back screamed. But I didn't move, didn't shift, didn't let any part of me exit the light. When the all clear finally sounded, the shadows snapped back to normal like rubber bands. They were just shadows again, dark spots where light didn't reach, nothing more. But sometimes, when I'm walking the blocks and pass through a shadow, I feel them watching from the dark place. All those trapped souls, preserved in eternal moments of horror, waiting for the next lockdown, the next chance to pull someone else into their timeless screaming. Rule 6. The third floor is OFF limits during new moons. This is the most important rule, Tommy said on my last night of training. All the others, breaking them might kill you. This one, breaking this could unmake you, could unmake all of us. The third floor of cell block D officially doesn't exist. The elevator has no button for it. The stairwell door is welded shut, chained, and marked with symbols that hurt to look at. But during new moons, when the night is darkest, you can hear it up there. Moving, breathing, waiting. What's on the third floor? I asked. The original inmates. The ones from when this was an asylum. They never left. They just went up. And on new moon nights, the barrier thins, and they try to come back down. I respected this rule religiously for 3 months. Every new moon, I stayed on the first floor, avoided looking at the ceiling, and ignored the sounds from above. Footsteps that walked in patterns that spelled out words, scratching that sounded like laughter, laughter that sounded like screaming. But last month, everything went wrong. It was a new moon, and I was staying carefully on the first floor when the lights went out. Not a lockdown, a power failure. The backup generators kicked in, but they only powered essential systems. The security lights were not considered essential. I was in total darkness in cell block D on a new moon. And above me, I heard the door to the third floor open. The stairwell door, the one that was welded and chained, creaked open, metal shrieking as it bent. Footsteps started down the stairs. Not normal footsteps. It sounded like someone walking on limbs that had too many joints, taking steps at angles that shouldn't exist. I ran for the security office, navigating by memory and terror. Behind me, I could hear them descending. The original inmates. The ones who'd been here when the boundaries were weaker, when the asylum was a door instead of a prison. My flashlight barely penetrated the darkness. The beam seemed to bend away from what it illuminated, like the light itself was afraid. But I caught glimpses, enough to know I never wanted to see more. They weren't human anymore. Maybe they never were. They moved like spiders made of human parts, too many arms and legs sprouting from bodies that had forgotten which way was up. Their faces were scattered across their forms, and I hear, a mouth there, features spread like butter across too much bread. One of them spoke with 4 mouths at once. New friend, come up. Up is better. Up is where the walls don't exist. Up is where you can be everything. They were getting closer. I could feel the wrongness of them, reality bending under their presence. Inmates in their cells were screaming, banging on bars, begging to be let out rather than face what was coming. I made it to the security office and slammed the door, but doors mean nothing to things that don't believe in barriers. They started coming through, not opening it, not breaking it, just ignoring that it existed. That's when Tommy appeared. He was supposed to be off duty, but there he was, carrying a box I'd never seen before. Inside was a lantern, old, maybe from the 1890s, burning with a flame that was the wrong color, somewhere between blue and the color of regret. Close your eyes, he commanded, and I did. Even through my eyelids, I saw the flash when he lit it. The original inmates screamed, not with their mouths, but with their existence. The light from that lantern didn't illuminate, it imposed. It forced reality to be real, forced shapes to make sense, forced things to exist in only 3 dimensions. When I opened my eyes, they were gone. The stairwell door was sealed again. The lights flickered back on. What was that lantern? I gasped. Something from before the asylum, before the prison. The natives left it here. It's what keeps them up there most of the time. But on new moons, someone has to hold it. Someone has to remind them that down here, we have rules. Why didn't you tell me about it? Tommy's good eye looked sad. Because knowing it exists means you might have to use it. And using it costs. Each time you light it, you see things as they really are. And trust me, kid, you don't want to see this place as it really is. He was right. Even that brief exposure, with my eyes closed, had shown me glimpses. Cell block D isn't a building. It's a scab, a patch over something that should never have been opened. And we're not guards. We're antibodies, fighting an infection that's been trying to spread for over a century. The night everything broke. It started with D-213. I was 2 weeks past the new moon incident, working my regular shift, when I heard it, metal tearing. Not bending, not breaking, but tearing like paper. The welded door of D-213 was splitting down the middle. "Tommy," I shouted into my radio. "D-213 is." "I know," his voice crackled back. "It's happening everywhere. Get to the office. Now." As I ran, I saw the impossible. Every rule was breaking at once. The count was wrong. Inmates were multiplying, dividing, becoming concepts instead of people. D-108 had 17 people in it. D-115 had -3. Margaret Cahill was in the hallway, but she was solid, real, and she could see me whether I acknowledged her or not. "Help me," she begged. "I can't find my rounds." "Where are my rounds?" Inmates with non-reflective eyes were squeezing through their bars, their bodies liquefying to fit through gaps. They weren't asking for water anymore. They were taking it, pulling moisture from the air, from the walls, from the screaming inmates who still had moisture to give. The shadows were moving without a lockdown, reaching out from every dark corner, pulling things into the darkness. But instead of taking people away, they were bringing things back. Wrong things. Things that had been digested by decades of darkness and reformed into nightmares. And above us, the third floor was opening. All of it. Every door, every cell, every barrier that kept the original inmates contained. They were coming down, not sneaking anymore, but marching, proud, eager to share their perspective with the world. I made it to the security office where Tommy was standing at the desk, the ancient lantern in one hand, his service pistol in the other. "What's happening?" I gasped. "Convergence," he said calmly, "happens every few decades. All the boundaries fail at once. The prison tries to birth itself into the world." He checked his pistol, though we both knew bullets would be useless. Usually, we can hold it back. But this time, the door exploded inward. William Cray stood there, or what had been wearing him. It was tall, too tall for the doorway, so it bent in ways that space shouldn't allow. Its face was a kaleidoscope of features, all of them screaming. 52 years, it said with voices like breaking glass. I've been asking nicely for 52 years. Behind it, the others came. Margaret Cahill, her body switching between life and death with each step. The shadow-trapped guards, half in and half out of darkness. The wrong-eyed inmates, flowing like water but hunting like wolves. The original inmates from the third floor, spider-walking across the ceiling, their scattered features rearranging into expressions of joy. "Light the lantern," Tommy said. "You said it costs." "Light it." I grabbed the lantern and lit it. Reality screamed. The flame that emerged wasn't fire. It was truth, burning away lies and revealing what cell block D really was. We weren't in a building. We were in a throat. A massive, impossible throat made of concrete and steel and suffering, swallowing constantly, pulling things down into something vast and hungry below. The inmates weren't in cells. They were polyps, infections, canker sores in this massive esophagus. And we weren't guards. We were the things being swallowed, slowly, over years and decades, dissolved by the darkness and reformed into part of the throat itself. But the lantern's light fought back. It imposed our reality, our truth, onto the throat. It forced it to be a prison again, forced the inmates back into their cells, forced the shadows to be shadows and the dead to be dead. William Cray shrieked as he was pulled back into D-213. This isn't over. The throat remembers. The throat always remembers. One by one, they all retreated. Margaret to her eternal rounds, the shadows to their corners, the original inmates spider-crawling back to the third floor. The convergence ended not with a bang, but with a whimper, reality reasserting itself like a rubber band snapping back into place. I stood there, holding the lantern, shaking. I'd seen the truth. Cell block D wasn't containing criminals or monsters. It was containing a mouth that wanted to eat the world.